Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Humphrey. I'm the CMO of Onfido. I want to thank you for joining our session today. We're going to talk about your phone, your face, anchoring users to real identities. And what do we mean by that? So today on the internet, trust is lost. And we think that's because the identity, as we all are very engaged with, identity is broken. The way we identify people today on the internet is broken. It's oftentimes tied to our device. We lose our devices. It's tied to our phone numbers. Those are open to fraudulent activity, or our identity is tied to data. Those annoying questions that we have to ask, we have to answer to identify ourselves. Things like my grandmother's maiden name, what car did I have in 1987? Those data-oriented things, which means that we treat our actual customers by fraudsters by default. We have to ask them all these questions to identify them, when in fact, most of our visitors to the websites that we engage with, 98% of them are all legit people that we should just know as real people. So why do we think this changes? Why do we think there's a change necessary in how we identify people? Obviously, the first one around in person just doesn't scale. That's and most people aren't having to do much of that anymore. The traditional databases have been hacked. You think of most of the data sources to questions that are answered to identify people, there's been some kind of breach associated with them. So they're very low assurance associated with that. And strong data-oriented stuff means people will abandon the process, and you get a lot of churn of customers through that process. So we believe there's a new generation of identification technologies around identifying a real person, tying that person to a document, if you will. So a legal document that shows that person, that person actually exists in the world as defined by a government ID, such as a driver's license, a passport, etc., and their biometrics, their face, something that will never change, something that they never leave their house without. We all have a face. And what Onfido does is connects that government identification to a biometric, to a face, to ensure that somebody is real. Very simple process. Very simply, it looks like this. It looks like document verification. And some of you probably have done this before. Could be with some of our customers or others. Document verification, you take a picture of a driver's license, a very simple process, or a passport. And what happens in the background is that we look for that for fraud detection. We run that through our AI engines. We actually have a hybrid approach to this, that if it's need be, we actually can have human identity agents that actually look at the document as well if need be. But for the most part, those are identified by our engine. We then do a face verification. We check that that's a real face. We check that it's not a photograph, that somebody's actually doing a selfie. And then we can compare those two to give you assurance that it is a real identity. It's a real person that is characterized by the characteristics on their driver's license or passport. And the final thing we can also do with that, in addition to the fraud detection and making sure it's a real person, is extracting that for autofill. So as you're onboarding new customers or new clients or new citizens or whatever your use case might be, we can actually make that a simple process of filling in the forms. We pull that straight off the documents. So let's talk about the identity lifecycle and where this kind of capability can kick in and help. Today, your customers, you're registering people when they're first logging into your sites or joining your service or whatever that happens to be. They then log in, obviously, when they want to access their services, buy your products, register for events, whatever happens to be. They transact and they lose their passwords. It's the nature of the beast today. And then they also have to edit their accounts. So where can what identity verification, this real identity, where can that help? Even on the front side of this, that registration process, we can capture that through an autofill process. That login process of identity verification, like we talked about a bit ago, does exactly that. It solves for those things, both in registration and verification, upfront, early in that process. With the document analysis that we talked about, the biometric check that connects your face back to that document, and then high integrity data extraction and autofill to have low friction when someone else is signing up for a new services, autofilling, all those capabilities. So what's another aspect of how identity verification and using a user's real identity can solve what is a huge pain point, and that's around account recovery. And I guarantee you, as if you're an Okta customer or any other identity access management vendor, or a user of, that one of the biggest pains is recovering a user. Just all of us know, recovering a username, recovering an account if you forgot. All that is a highly friction, and also a place that you can lose customers if it's just such a pain. So I want to talk about that a little bit today. Today, in the account recovery process, when a user's locked out of their account, whatever that happens to be, there's all sorts of blockers in the way of how you have to get reconnected. Traditional multi-factor authentication methods have become, it's sometimes too much friction. They can be inaccurate, and they're also tied back to a device. So if a user has lost its device in this process, if you just think about the SMS codes that we sometimes get that have to then click on that code to then log in to reset our password. Well, what if you've lost your phone? What if you bought a new phone? Too much is tied to a specific device, that process can become very painful. And then there's the fallback to that process is then a call to your support team, a call to a support center. All of those things just to recover your good customers' passwords. This isn't even necessarily part of that security process, but just somebody trying to get back into your services can be highly fraught with risk and associated with it. And the reality of it's a big problem. That's why we wanted to focus on this one for today's discussion. 21% of your customers forget their password within every 2 weeks. That's amazing. Almost a quarter forget our passwords every 2 weeks, or forget a password to a system every 2 weeks. 20 to 50% of all help desk calls within an organization are for account recovery. So even with all of the greatest processes in place, that the need to be able to have a user recover their password could defaults back to somebody calling a help desk. And then the cost of doing that, the average business cost of a password reset alone is around $70. So that not only is this a risky proposition in terms of losing your customers or onboarding the wrong customers, it's also a rather costly one as well. We can solve that what has become a complex thing of resetting our accounts, recovering our passwords with nothing more than a selfie. So as we described before, described at the beginning of this process, a user can log in to the system, identify themselves during their onboarding with their document that autofill and their face, confirming who they are. Now we're down the path and we're weeks or months or whenever it happens to be later, and the customer forgets their password, they lose their device, whatever it is, they can't access their account anymore. All we have to do, and very simply implemented this in front of an existing registration or login system, is we've already captured their biometric face and tied it to a document, so we know they're actually that person. Now to reset a password or to recover an account, all they have to do is do a selfie. It's literally as easy as that. So the friction associated with this is painless, and the security level of it is even that much greater. So the account recovery is actually a huge piece of where using a user's real identity can really play in. Another one is just for high risk transactions. So think about these for a while. High risk, or just where you need a step up. High risk transactions can be where other fraud systems have kicked in and said, we're concerned about this transaction that's going on. Maybe it's a very large dollar bank transfer, could be a high risk transaction just associated with the type of transaction it is. In the shared economy for cars, for example, we've got a number of car share services that use this. Those are considered high risk transactions because they're getting into a very highly valuable vehicle, a vehicle that is owned by somebody else, and a vehicle that can actually cause there can be wrecks and associated with that, so the liability associated with it. So a type of transaction in a high risk moment where that document linked to an account with biometrics makes sense. Another one, and right now we're in the middle of our tax season, and if you think about it now more than ever, the need for digital, as we're all working from home, the need for digital verification has even increased dramatically. If you have an online tax service, the need to access that tax service maybe annually. You just don't do it very, very often. And so what would appear in a normal instance would seem like an inactive user. It's not an inactive user, just doesn't use it very often. It's the perfect opportunity to use identity verification in the mode that we're talking about. And then the last one that I want to share a little bit about is around the verification of ownership of account data, both covered by the California Privacy Act and GDPR and others that are fast becoming real drivers within organizations. How does somebody verify that the data that you are possessing, you as a company that's possessing, how do we verify that it's actually the person on the phone who wants to either delete that, which you're required by law to allow them to do, or to edit the data? How can we help in that one? You think about it, and oftentimes you potentially have collected personal information about somebody that you may not actually have an account on them. Your marketing systems may be collecting people's emails and web browsing history of what somebody's doing. And if somebody now in the CCPA and in GDPR, you are required by law, if somebody wants that information either edited or deleted, you have to do it. So if they don't already have an account with you, how can you verify that that person is who they say they are? Well, it's pretty logical. Where we go with this is that online verification using again, a driver's license, a document, a face, connecting those things to do, then gives you confidence that the user has the rights to access that stuff, to go in and delete or modify their data when you may not even have an account or relationship with your company. You're still required to provide them a capability to delete that. So very quickly, I've run through this in how identity verification can solve not just at the registration point of view, at the online verification point of view, at account recovery, password loss, and then even in privacy and compliance around CCPA, GDPR, and other privacy regulations. And all this is done in anchoring accounts to what we're referring to as a real identity, not a database thing, but government identification, a document, and biometric their face, to really simplify both that registration process, the verification and security process, the account recovery process, and privacy and compliance. So I wanted to run through this very quickly with you, tell you a little bit the commercial now for Onfido. Onfido has been around about 7 years, based in London with US headquarters in New York. About 1,500 customers. We're winning awards both for the success of the business, but more importantly, the innovation that we're using with artificial intelligence and applying it to both onboarding and security-related challenges. Our customer base is both kind of new types of organizations, very digital organizations, some of the original challenger banks, big customers of ours, and then more and more large enterprises across the globe are finding the need for digital verification to solve lots of different complex business problems. So we're seeing a tremendous growth. And then frankly, in today's kind of home-based working, the need to digitally verify has become even more incredibly important. So with that, we ran through this very quickly. We really appreciate your time today. Enjoyed the online experience with Octane. Please, if you've got any questions at all, put in the Q&A block here, and we'll respond to you as quickly as you can. Or come by our booth in the partner pavilion and visit us real time as we're staffing the booth as we speak. So thanks a lot. We appreciate your time today.